Hello neighbor, I'm Robert Burns, and as everyone would be aware, we are now about a week after the big election, and I wanted to take a little opportunity to come in and share with you my overjoy at the Attorney General's race. As most of you who follow this blog would know, I did dedicate a 5-part series to exposing much of the corruption and cronyism of our incumbent, soon-to-be outgoing Attorney General, James D. Buddy Caldwell. And as I was returning back from an election watch gathering for Senator David Vitter, which obviously didn't quite work out, but as I was returning back, I got several phone calls wanting to know if I had seen this masterful performance of our outgoing Attorney General. Obviously I wasn't able to. I did make note of the time on my clock though, and it said 10:22, and I knew I had recorded election results back at my home, so I knew I would have I just looked at the time so I would know when to go to, and boy, that was one more whale of a performance. And for those of you, I know some people come up to me and said, God, I had no idea. Well, I'm just here to tell you that was vintage Buddy Caldwell, but we'll get to that in just a moment. I wanted to start out by saying, I am a numbers man. I'm an inactive CPA. And I believe there are two things that don't lie. Number one is numbers, and number two is the camera. That's why I like both of them so much. I enjoy numbers, and as you can obviously tell, I very much enjoy the camera because once you get it on video, it's forever, and there's no misquoting or anything of that nature. So let's focus in on the numbers for a moment. If you look at the numbers between the primary and the runoff election in the Attorney General's race, there were 340,000 votes that were up for grabs who went to candidates who were outside of the two that made the runoff, Jeff Landry and Buddy Caldwell. There were 340,000 votes collectively for the other candidates in the race. Now there were also 20,000 more people voted. 20,000 more votes were cast in the runoff than were cast in the primary. So that's a total of 360,000 votes that were available for Mr. Caldwell to capture. Now that goes on the assumption that people would vote the same in the primary as they did in the runoff, which there may be some small segment that don't do that, but it's usually very minor. But at any rate, so we have 340,000 votes from other candidates and 20,000 new people showing up to vote, so that's 360,000 available votes for Mr. Caldwell. How much of that 360,000 did he get? 107,000. That's how much, or 30%. A whopping 70% of the folks who either voted new or were previously supportive of another candidate, namely either Geraldine Broussard-Baloney, Ike Jackson, or Marty Maley, 70% of those voters went with Jeff Landry. And I would submit to you that they did so as they become more educated in just what kind of an Attorney General we've had for the last 7 years. But I wanted to take just a few moments to express my sincere appreciation for several folks, and yes, I am going to save the best for last because I think that the most prominent role in this well, let me cover a few other people first. But first of all, David Hammer, the outstanding investigative report on the buddy system, if you will, laying the foundation for the absolute cronyism, the lining of the pockets of his friends and associates, which has been so replete during his administration. That was an authoritative WWL investigative report. David Hammer, every one of us in Louisiana is very, very much indebted to you for the outstanding nature of that investigative report. Right along those lines, Melissa Landry with the Lawsuit Abuse Watch in Louisiana, having repetitively exposed this type of thing and why Louisiana would rank as such a judicial hellhole. That is an excellent entity. The Louisiana Lawsuit Abuse Watch You'll find many other things, such as the adverse impact of the jury trial threshold that exists in Louisiana upon our insurance premiums. It's a really excellent organization and an excellent website to go to. That's the Louisiana Lawsuit Abuse Watch. And now let me just step down on a micro level, if you will. I want to give some thanks to Reverend Freddie Phillips. He is a dear friend of mine. Who, if you go to, I did a 5-part segment on Buddy Caldwell leading up to this election. If you go and look at the 5th part, you will see in excruciating detail, beyond just Buddy Caldwell's attempts to go after the auction license of Reverend Freddie Phillips, the only African-American auctioneer in the history of the state of Louisiana. For Reverend Phillips's role in reporting payroll fraud that was going on at the board at which he served, which was the Auctioneers Licensing Board. And I would add that despite Mr. Caldwell, and you've got the videos are there, the videos don't lie, folks, that's why I love them so much. Despite Mr. Caldwell having recommended to that board that they procure outside legal counsel, which turned out to be a convicted felon friend of Mr. Caldwell in the name of Larry S. Bankston, to look at pursuit of those licenses. That is the exposure of the depths to which Mr. Caldwell will go to in order to perpetuate corruption. And I would submit to you that it's that type treatment of the minority population in Louisiana, particularly the African American population, is why you saw the opposition that Mr. Caldwell encountered, not just from Mike Jackson, but from Miss Gerald Broussard Baloney. And I think Mr. Caldwell kind of subscribed to an old school theory that he could do whatever he wanted with the African American population, and namely, as an example, Reverend Phillips in the pursuit of his auction license when his concerns about the payroll fraud were substantiated by the Inspector General's office when they looked into the matter. But that doesn't change the fact Mr. Caldwell's approach was to go after Mr. Phillips, or Reverend Phillips's license, over his suspicions on these payroll fraud. But I would submit to you that Mr. Caldwell's approach, as I said, is to treat African Americans any way he wants during his tenure, and then when it comes election time, he'd just sprinkle a little bit of money. You can go into the campaign finance reports and see this. Just sprinkle a little bit of money to several chapters of the NAACP and figure, hey, I can just easily buy these folks. Oh, well, it doesn't work, Mr. Caldwell. People, before the advent of internet and YouTube, you might could have, and that's very old school, you might could pull something like that off and just take them for granted, but you can't do that anymore, thank God. And so and that brings me, well, I obviously, some people wondered if I was going to do a Bobby Jindal sound-off feature. I said no. If you go back and look at the very first sound-off feature of Buddy Caldwell, I said I thought it would be far more productive to expose the corruption and the cronyism that has existed within the Attorney General's office, because unlike Bobby Jindal, who can't run again, and we're never going to hear from him again, I think we can all agree on that, at least as far as being elected. You're never going to shut that loud mouth up. You're always going to hear from him somewhere. But we're not going to hear from him in official capacity come January the 12th, whatever date it is. There were people who told me that I was wasting my time, that there was no way that Buddy Caldwell was going to be able to be ousted from the Attorney General position. Well, you know, first of all, it wasn't a waste of time. You would be stunned at a lot of the feedback I got. I mean stunned. That's why I'm getting a call as I'm coming back from Kenner saying, have you seen Buddy Caldwell's performance? Well, it's because folk knew, you know, they took an interest in the videos that I presented, and so I got phone calls. But, you know, obviously it was not a waste of time. That's going to bring me to the last person that I want to individually recognize, and I'm sure I left plenty of people off. Obviously, the coordinators of the Super PAC did a fantastic job in exposing Mr. Caldwell's corruption and his cronyism. The sleeping in court, you know, the $600 an hour, which all emanated originally from that WWL report as well. But they did a great job. But I'm saving till now to give some really, really special recognition to Miss Gerald Broussard Baloney. She saw Buddy Caldwell for what he is, and she didn't wince for words, and she had a tremendous impact upon these results. I don't know if this would have been possible without her. The strength of her testimonial, both when she made the initial endorsement of Jeff Landry and throughout that time frame thereafter, the commercial that she shot talking about Caldwell's corruption and cronyism and saying we could not survive, we could not tolerate another 4 years of his corruption, and concluding the commercial and saying we must vote for Jeff Landry. So Miss Broussard Baloney, I want to extend my sincerest thanks to you, because whether you went back and look at several of the videos that previously went up, Mr. Caldwell has had an adverse impact upon me, and certainly upon my best friend in the auction industry, Reverend Freddie Phillips. And you know, I don't make these things up, okay? The documents and the videotapes clearly demonstrate just what kind of a loose cannon we have had in the Attorney General's office over the last 7 years. And what I found in that, and I know that future Attorney General, I want to call him AG Jeff Landry so bad I could just, but it's not official until it's in January. So what Mr. Landry, or AG-elect Landry, he's alluded to the bipartisan nature of his victory, and that's one thing I take tremendous comfort from, because whether you are largely conservative, as I am, or whether you're largely liberal, one thing that I think both segments of the population can agree strongly on is that we should have a zero tolerance for public corruption, cronyism, and nepotism. It doesn't matter whether people's philosophical beliefs in terms of liberal or conservative, those are just genuine areas that we form our foundations on. But it was so encouraging, so heartwarming to see that irrespective of which end of the spectrum a voter may fall on, none of us should have a tolerance for corruption, cronyism, nepotism, and that defines the Attorney General's office over the last 7 years. Corruption, cronyism, and nepotism, and Miss Broussard Baloney, stand tall against it. Miss Broussard Baloney, I'm having difficulty coming up with words, so all I can just say is thank you. Thank you very, very much for your courage, your conviction, and it means an awful lot to me. I'm just going to say that. So let me move on to that performance. All right, Mr. Caldwell's performance on election night and giving a so-called concession speech. And I would just say, you know, I had Thanksgiving meal with my family. I said, God Almighty, they didn't even know who Buddy Caldwell is. They said, what a disastrous performance. And I said, it's nothing new. This is vintage Buddy Caldwell. I would submit to you that it's why his handlers don't want him speaking in public forums. I think you can see why they so carefully control why he's never speaking at the Baton Rouge Press Club. Why he's never spoken, speaking, that's a whole new word, why he's never spoken at the Baton Rouge Press Club. And I think if you look at that performance, you can see why they would not want him speaking. But let me just say this, with regard to the contents, when I think back of replaying in my mind some of the things that clown said, it's very difficult to try to keep a straight face and address some of the things that he brought up in a state that I would imagine was quite inebriated. But at any rate, you know, he wants to talk about, well, they went too far, and, you know, all of these things being said, and he wouldn't mind an apology even over a cup of coffee. You know, so let me tell you something. Buddy Caldwell, I got news for you. It was nothing made up, and in fact, Jeff Landry and the Super PAC didn't go far enough. But I'm assuming you want to think all of these contracts that were in existence, the dollar amount, you know, that was all one big conspiracy. It was all made up. The fact that you have illegally permitted contingency contracts for legal services to transpire in this state, that was all made up. And by the way, for our viewers out there who said, well, what was he talking about when he said, oh, Jeff Landry's going to find out that Alabama is a sovereign entity, you know? Well, what he's referring to there, and I can understand why the average citizen would wonder, what in the hell are you drunk fool? What in the hell are you talking about? Well, Buddy Caldwell, like so many instances of corruption having been presented to him, thinks it's real cute. The fact that, oh, well, contingency contracts aren't legal in Louisiana, but here's what my buddies can do. If they are legal in Alabama, and so we're just going to have a lead counsel be over there in Alabama, and, you know, once I've sued the drug company, why, you know, well, they don't care where the check gets made to. They could care less. They just we want you off our back, okay? I think you see why they were willing to put up the kind of money they put up to take you out, and thank God they did. But Caldwell said, let's get creative here. Let's have the contracts be executed with an Alabama law firm, and then the payment when this lawsuit is settled, because we're going to settle it real quick, because we're talking about a lot of money for my buddies and my friends. Okay, so we're going to settle this lawsuit. We're talking $54 million. Of course, we're going to settle it, you know, and y'all going to get plenty of money, because here's what we're going to do. The settlement's going to be with the Alabama law firm, you see, and then they're going to just remit the referral fee on down to Louisiana and my buddies, you see, and that's how Buddy Caldwell was in his own mind able to circumvent Louisiana's prohibition against contingency fees for attorneys, and that's how he could stare into the camera when David Hammer was interviewing him and say, I've never led a contingency contract. You know, Mr. Caldwell, people see through all that. You know, it's typical. It's typical of the type thing I've seen in boards and commissions that you won't look into about circumventing the spirit and the letter of the law with that kind of horse manure, okay? You know, and the chickens came home to roost with you with that kind of thing, all right? And you thought you were being cute. It didn't turn out too cute when you saw the numbers on Saturday of November the 21st. You didn't think that was so cute, did you? But you're seeing the fallout from all of your cute little maneuverings. Now, that takes us to the next episode, you know, and telling Jeff Landry, don't you screw this up? And, you know, I wouldn't mind an apology. Don't you screw this up? Let me tell you something. If every voter in this state should feel sorry for Jeff Landry and what he's about to inherit, he is inheriting the most screwed up mess over there at that Attorney General's office than you could possibly imagine. And that is particularly true with the CNSI lawsuit, in which case we are in a disastrous position. And you can go look at the third installment of the Buddy Caldwell series that I did, and you would have to agree, Buddy Caldwell's gotten us in one hell of a mess, okay? And no, Mr. Caldwell, it was all made up. The Scott Bailey witness tampering that you engaged in, that Mike McKay so wonderfully exposed out there, him flying to Orlando, Florida to engage in that witness tampering, to change the timeline, for there even to be a second version of this Canigo report, which is evidence tampering. No, it's all made up, Mr. Caldwell. None of it really happened. It's all one of those dreams that I guess you must be having. And that's not even to mention the fiasco that you put Bruce Greenstein in a desperate attempt to try and justify why you canceled that contract and put us on the hook for tens of millions of dollars, which is what we're going to end up having to pay on this thing. I mean, Mr. Landry's going to have to figure out how he wants to handle that lawsuit, but let me tell you, Buddy Caldwell put him in a disastrous position, and one of the chief reasons we're in that disastrous position is because Buddy Caldwell put his little pipsqueak two-bit junior son, David Caldwell, whom as Mr. Landry pointed out in the ad, Buddy Caldwell doubled the salary of because, well, he's my son and that's the way we do things in Louisiana, see? He headed both these cases, and that's why we're in the mess we're in. And, I really hope that there is a federal probe of this into the role of the Attorney General's office, because the accusation has been made, it's been laid out there that the Attorney General's office served as the handmaiden for keeping the contract with Molina by arbitrarily canceling it without proper grounds, based on one disgruntled employee's email. By the way, Steve Smith, if you saw Mr. Caldwell's performance, I wonder how you're feeling. Wonder how much you think Buddy Caldwell and the crew of clowns they got over there going to have your back in the $28.5 million lawsuit you've been hit with as far as your role in this whole CNSI fiasco. I don't know about you, but if it was me, I wouldn't take a lot of comfort from that little episode from Mr. Caldwell. I don't think they didn't show up in Orlando on phase 2 of that deposition. They left Steve Smith out there and hung him out to dry, and I'd say you've really been hung out to dry, Steve Smith. Of course, you chickens come home to roost for you as well for your role in that whole. It was all bitterness over a $50,000 salary reduction. You were still making $200,000, but that you had to get your little bit of revenge in there. Now look what a mess. And of course Caldwell, and I was willing to cut Bobby Jindal slack, in saying that, oh well, the AG's office said you need to terminate this contract, so we better terminate it. But you had the opportunity to observe Buddy Caldwell firsthand. He is what he is, okay? And there should have been considerably more substantiation before the state hauled off and wrongfully terminated that contract, all right? So that's on you. But I know you didn't want to have the slightest tint of controversy or anything in your delusional quest for the presidency. So what did you do? You canceled the contract, and we're going to have we're going to have to write a check, and every bit of this is in all likelihood rooted back to, for whatever reason, Buddy Caldwell's desire to keep that contract with Molina, and in the process cost us tens of millions of dollars of unnecessary added processing costs, not to mention the judgment check we're going to have to write when CNSI prevails in their lawsuit. So that'll address Mr. Landry not screwing this up. I mean, it would be very, very almost impossible for you to hand over a more screwed up mess that he is inheriting than you have. And I know you made your appeal, well, keep everybody, no, I've got the top notch. God, only an idiot would believe that. I mean, you have some of the most incompetence reigning in that office that I have ever seen in my life. And if you go and look at installment 5, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but there are a lot of names thrown out there, videos of showing these folk making fools of themselves, okay? And by the way, Mr. Caldwell, I guess also it was a dreamed up that you have the trial judge telling you shouldn't have put Bruce Greenstreet's transcript in the public record. 3 judges from the appeals court saying you shouldn't have put it in the public record. But Pipsqueak son David Caldwell, we did everything right. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, it really is. But at any rate, if you look at segment 5, you'll see a number of folk with the AG's office that I have on video making fools of themselves. So to suggest that Jeff Landry should retain everybody you've got over there only if he wants to have his own battleship go down, because between you adding it and the kind of clownery that you have in that office, that's a large reason as to why you saw the results that you saw. Now, having said that, I do want to make one statement. There is one person in the Attorney General's office, and I'll make this appeal directly to Jeff Landry. There is one person in the Attorney General's office that I saw the utmost of professionalism, the utmost of knowledge of her area of coverage in the Attorney General's office, and that would be Miss Emily Boyce. She is top-notch. She does an excellent job. She is incredibly knowledgeable of the state's open meetings laws and the access to records law, public records laws. She has been a tremendous asset to that department. Unfortunately, obviously, they have people that either don't listen to her, they don't bother when they're in an administrative hearing with saying, let me call the office and speak with the authority, who would be Miss Boyce. Instead, they decide to wing it because they're on a power trip out there. And Michael Vallon is in particular who I'm referencing there, and then also Lindsay Hunter, but she's now gone, so that's not an issue. But you know, Mr. Vallon just, whoa, he gonna state to open meetings when he didn't know shellac from Shinola on what that law was. But I can guarantee you Emily Boyce would have set him straight, you know, because she is very good. So I'm gonna make that one statement, Mr. Caldwell. I'm sorry, Mr. Landry, that Emily Boyce is one that I really believe it would be advantageous for you to hang on to. Some of the other folk that are mentioned in number 5, I'm not going to comment on because I think it would be obvious what my feelings are. And this whole idea that, oh, I got a top-notch staff. You got a staff that engages in witness tampering, that being Scott Bailey. I mean, it's a litany. It's a comedy show. It would be comedy if it wasn't for the fact it's cost us so much money, the disaster that you have been running over there. And I want to say one thing about this complaint that, oh, Jeff Landry and the Super PAC went too far, and oh, I could have won it, but I didn't have enough money. Well, gee, first of all those attorneys that you line their pockets in, what's the matter? They couldn't step up to the plate, you know, and provide money for Super PAC for you to counter all this. No, the problem is you can't counter it. Because it's true, okay? Not only is it true, not only is everything Jeff Landry put out there true, but I would submit he didn't go far enough. I mean, let's not forget, you also blanked out, that's your version, of what happened. When it crashed a car, it wasn't even registered in your name. It was in some name, I don't even remember what it was, but you were headed back home and you just went right off the road and crashed the vehicle, and there was one news outlet that reported that you were inebriated when you did so. Now, they did retract it, but, oh, I left out one other person. Thank you so much, Dr. Dan Kyle. Thank you so much, Dr. Dan Kyle, for your testimonial of what Buddy Caldwell's treatment of you was when you were reporting wrongdoing back when he was a district attorney. I did not mean to leave you out, Dr. Kyle, and I had an immediate flashback to that because, you know, the media outlet reported that you were inebriated and then they retracted it. But I got to wonder, were they strong-armed into retracting that? Because that sure is what you did with Dr. Dan Kyle. You know, he was going to report your wrongdoing and did. And he says you were, next thing you know, you were looking at being indicted by grand jury because that is the kind of corrupt nature that you are. It's in your DNA, okay? But at any rate, you crashed this car, which I think was fair game, quite frankly, you know, and that was never mentioned in any of the advertising, you know, and your explanation, well, you just blacked out, you know. I guess you and Mike Edmondson can have a competition for who can crash the most state-owned vehicles. So to say that someone owes you an apology, not only is everything Jeff Landry said, not only is everything I said true, we didn't go far enough, you know. But I guess there was enough out there that people saw you for what you are. But given your performance in that little concession speech, I think it lended credence to the fact you very well may have been inebriated when you so-called blacked out and ran right off the road and totaled a state-owned vehicle that was registered in some bizarre name. So, I guess that pretty well covers your performance in your so-called concession speech. And so, Mr. Caldwell, you'll be making your exit, I don't know whether it's January 12th, whenever it is, but I think we ought to use you as a warm-up, okay? The NCAA basketball tournament is in March, and I think may go into early April, traditionally. But I'm going to conclude this whole video at the point that you're ready to walk out of, thank God, walk out of that Attorney General's office and head on into retirement and get that rocking chair. I think it's fitting that we close this thing out with the theme song of basketball teams as they exit the NCAA tournament. So would you cue it up for me? This won't be an Elvis. I did that for you in what was it? Episode 5. That was to show you I could be a good sport, which I can. But you're about ready to make your exit, and it'll be a couple of months before NCAA when you make your exit, it will be a couple of months before NCAA basketball teams make their exits as they lose. And you probably have heard this a little chant before as the losing team it becomes apparent that they will be exiting, and that goes sha-na-na-na, sha-na-na-na, hey, 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 goodbye, sha-na-na-na, sha-na-na-na, hey, 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 goodbye. You enjoy retirement, Mr. Caldwell. Pick up that rocking chair and enjoy. And I hope everyone's enjoyed this sound off feature of me sounding off on the past 7 years of our illustrious attorney General James D. Buddy Caldwell. Thank God, soon to be gone in about, 40 days or so, an abrupt end to that corrupt administration. Let me say this, our next sound off feature you will not want to miss. We're going to have a very big announcement entailing Governor-elect John Bel Edwards. I'll save it for the latter part of the week, and probably, maybe even the early part of next week. It just depends on how long it takes me to put together what I'm going to put together for you, but you will not want to miss it. So we will be having that sound-off feature on Governor-elect John Bel Edwards coming up real soon. Thank you so much. This is Robert Burns. Hope everyone has had an enjoyable, a happy Thanksgiving, and that you will have a very Merry Christmas and upcoming Happy New Year. Thank you once again.